Well, good evening. Welcome into our CBS 58 studios, and we start tonight with breaking news on the verdict in the trial of Judge Hannah Dugan.
Judge Dugan was accused of trying to hide an undocumented immigrant from immigrations and customs enforcement agents in the Milwaukee courthouse.
Yeah, that happened in April of this year, bringing national attention to Milwaukee amidst heightened tensions over immigration enforcement in the United States. It spurred questions over whether immigration enforcement agents should be able to arrest people in courthouses.
Now let's get to that verdict. On the felony count, the jury decided Dugan is guilty of obstructing a federal agency. On count 2, a misdemeanor, the jury decided the judge is not guilty of concealing someone to prevent arrest.
Yeah, we do have several crews at the federal courthouse right now with the latest from the final day of the trial on the jury's decision.
And we're going to start with our Adam Reif, who has been following this case since the very beginning. He joins us now live right outside the federal courthouse. And Adam, what can you tell us?
Well, for all the attention this case has gotten for months, since April, since this incident happened on April 18th, it ended very quietly and very quickly. The jury deliberating for more than 6 hours and then telling the court at about 8:30 they had those verdicts. The split verdicts, not unheard of, but certainly uncommon. We'll get to what that means in the future in just a little bit. Reaction, though, has been coming in very quickly, and the defense team thinks they do have an opening with this split verdict. The 6-hour deliberation, as we mentioned, was so long that the jury wanted pizza about halfway through. At 5:30, they were given the choice. Do you want to come back tomorrow, or do you want to push through? And they decided to order pizza and push through. They asked 3 questions, and this jury asked three very important questions. The first one was for another piece of evidence, and the court was able to get that to them no problem. But the second and third questions are what this case hinged on, and it created a lot of debate in the courtroom as the legal teams were deciding how to answer. The second question the jury asked was, did Judge Dugan need to know the name of the person on the arrest warrant? In essence, how could Judge Dugan obstruct Eduardo Flores Ruiz's arrest if she didn't know that Eduardo Flores Ruiz was the one who was going to be arrested? There was long debate for about 25-30 minutes, and then they sent that question back to the jury saying, no, she did need to know the name. That's ultimately the count that was found not guilty. The third question was very similar. Did Judge Dugan need to know the identity of the person in order to obstruct those agents? They found a compromise and sent that back to the jury. That is what they found guilty on, a guilty felony charge. Each charge has very specific components, and it was a very granular closing argument as these legal teams have gone through all the components that had to be met. Ultimately, not guilty on count 1, guilty on count 2, but as we'll hear from Catherine Merck shortly, the defense said this case is far from over. Back to you.
All right, Adam Reif leading off our coverage tonight. Adam, thank you very much.
Yeah, and just moments after the jury's verdict was read, we did hear from prosecutors.
And Catherine Merck joins us now live with reaction from the federal attorney leading the case. Catherine.
Natalie and Jessup, interim U.S. Attorney Brad Schimmel took to the podium shortly after the verdict was read. He said he'd like to think that Judge Dugan would look back on this situation with some regrets. Now, as the jury came to 2 different decisions on the 2 counts, he said ultimately experience, common sense, as well as the evidence in the case led the jury to make a decision that the courthouse was indeed the safest place for an arrest. Shortly after Schimmel spoke, attorney Stephen Biskupik with Dugan's defense team came to the podium. He said while they're disappointed in today's outcome, they believe the failure of the prosecution to secure convictions on both counts demonstrates the opportunity to have clear Judge Dugan's name and shows she did nothing wrong in this matter.
I'd like to think that she looked back on this from the get-go with some regrets about what she did that day. She certainly did seem to, in those communications in the days following, where she had conceded that she was in the doghouse with the chief judge, I think she recognized this wasn't the right way to do things.
Judge hasn't set a sentencing date, so obviously he's going to take this seriously as well. And I would just say the case is a long way from over.
In terms of sentencing, U.S. interim attorney Brad Schimmel said that he's going to look at some reports over the next couple of weeks. A date was not officially locked down at this time, but we can expect that hearing to come in the coming weeks and months. We'll send it back to you both in the studio.
All right, Catherine Merck with reaction for us tonight. Catherine, thank you.
And Judge Dugan's arrest sparked protests across Milwaukee when it happened and spurred backlash all across the country.
Our AJ Byatt-Poor talked to a supporter of Judge Dugan's tonight after learning the verdict. And what did that person have to say, AJ?
Well, Natalie, Jessup, good evening. For all that national attention, for the many local demonstrations that we've seen here since April, there were only 2 demonstrators here outside the federal courthouse after that verdict was read. Certainly, the fact that that verdict came down at 8:30 on a weeknight, as well as these bone-chilling temperatures, contributed to that light turnout. But certainly many people were following this case closely at home, and they almost certainly fell into one of 2 camps. There are those who believe that federal prosecutors were right in charging Hannah Dugan, making clear that no one, not even a judge, is above the law. There are others who believe that this was an overly aggressive prosecution, that the Trump administration went out of its way to make Judge Dugan an example for others who would dare interfere with their efforts to ramp up immigration enforcement. The 2 people outside the courthouse tonight were part of that latter group. They say they support Judge Dugan. One of those individuals says he personally knows Dugan and has done so for several years. He says they've worked together with the Milwaukee Turners, that is a left-leaning organization, and he talked to me at length about why he felt it was so important to support his friend after the verdict was read.
She's a smart, caring, compassionate person who has sympathy for people who are being hounded, as is happening to a lot of people in our country and community.
Well, there are certainly those who have watched these proceedings, and they'll say Judge Dugan may have been acting out of compassion, but she broke the law in interfering with a federal act. The jury tonight agreed with that line of thinking, convicting Judge Dugan on that charge of interfering with a federal agency. However, they did not meet that burden of proof that she specifically harbored an individual. And that belief that you heard from Art, the supporter of Judge Dugan, that is an emotion that her legal team is looking to tap into, making a plea within an hour of that verdict coming out, seeking national support to reload her defense fund, as they say this fight will continue. Jessup and Natalie will be there every step of the way, but for now, let's go back to you in the studio.
All right, AJ Byatt-Poor live outside the courthouse for us tonight. Thank you.
Well, Judge Dugan's team did share this statement moments after the verdict was read, saying, quote, "While we are disappointed in today's outcome, the failure of the prosecution to secure convictions on both counts demonstrates the opportunity we have to clear Judge Dugan's name and show she did nothing wrong in this matter. We have planned for this potential outcome, and our defense of Judge Dugan is just beginning. This trial required considerable resources to prepare for, and public support for Judge Dugan's defense fund is critical as we prepare for the next phase of this defense." We are joined now by attorney Justin Padway to talk about the verdict that we got this evening in the trial.
Yeah, a split verdict, of course, guilty on the felony, not guilty on the misdemeanor. Adam was saying that it's not unheard of to have a split verdict, but it is uncommon.
Yeah, I would agree that it's uncommon, especially in this specific case, because the charges were so similar here. I think ultimately what you had is the jury determined that she needed to know exactly who was subject to that warrant for her to be guilty of concealing. But for being guilty of obstruction, all she needed to do was know that there was a federal proceeding happening. And that's where I think ultimately led us to the split verdict tonight.
All right, and we heard AJ talk about it, and then in the defense team statement that we just read, that they are planning to move forward with this case. What do you expect next steps will be now that we have this verdict?
Yeah, there's a long road ahead here. So what I think is going to ultimately happen is they're going to file motions subject of the verdict, basically challenging the verdict based on the same issue we just talked about. How is there a split verdict when this is so similar? After that, you're going to go into, if they're not successful, a pre-sentence investigation. Then you'd have sentencing in this case, and then you're going to see a long road of appeals at the 7th Circuit dealing with judicial immunity, 10th Amendment issues, separation of power issues. So there is a long road ahead for Judge Dugan and this defense team.
Can I ask you, are we talking days, weeks, months, years?
For this specific case at the circuit court level, we are talking months. I would say into next year in the summer, and then if it goes up to the 7th Circuit, you're looking at years potentially.
Oh.
All right. Well, Justin, thank you for that insight and for all of the information you provided throughout the trial.
Yeah,
thank you both.
Great work. Thank you. And we, of course, have been following this case from day one, and you can find all of our reporting about the judge's arrest all the way up through the trial at CBS58.com.